Advaita Yoga.
Слово «адвайта» означает недуальность.
The word Advaita means non-duality.
Об адвайте много говорят в направлении философской
Advaita is discussed to a large extent in the direction of philosophical thought
веданты.
called vedanta.
Веданта фактически
In fact, Vedanta is not one integral
стройное
teaching,
единое учение, но совокупность
but
личных
an aggregate of
воззрений
personal views
нескольких
of
философов
several Indian philosophers
в Индии, в Древней Индии, пытавшихся осмыслить
who tried to comprehend
и развить прежде всего
and
некоторые
develop
положения
some of the ideas
четырех
of the ancient Indian Vedas.
Все эти философы жили на
All
земле
these philosophers lived on the earth much later than Krishna,
и надо думать, все они были
and
знакомы
most
с его
likely
учением,
were familiar with his teachings contained in the Bhagavad Gita.
его понять.
However, not all of them could understand
И
those
это удивляет,
teachings. This is strange,
ведь через
because
Бхагавад-гиту
through the Bhagavad
Бог
Gita,
разъяснил людям
God explained to people
и суть Брахмана,
the essence of Brahman,
и суть
the
Ишвары,
essence of Ishvara,
и суть и значение
and the essence and significance of individual souls and of their development in a series of incarnations.
Причем отмечу, что ведь учение Кришны
Let me also note that the teachings of Krishna completely accord with other teachings
которые он
imparted by
передавал
God to incarnate people of the earth throughout millennia.
воплощенным людям Земли. С этим, кстати, можно подробно ознакомиться
By the way, you can become acquainted with these teachings in our book Classics of Spiritual Philosophy
из
and the
учения
Present.
Кришны. Вполне ясно,
From the teachings
что
of Krishna,
Брахман является
it is quite clear
и
that Brahman is a manifestation and the realizer of the will of Ishvara,
то есть изначального сознания,
that is the primordial consciousness, the Creator, God the Father.
Иначе говоря, термины
In
Брахман
other
и
words,
Святой Дух
the terms Brahman and Holy Spirit are identical.
Но в концепциях ведантистов
Nevertheless, in the concepts of Vedantists, the term Brahman sometimes means Ishvara, and sometimes the Absolute,
почерпнуто из
which originated from the philosophical views that had existed far before the divine incarnation of Krishna.
У нас сейчас нет цели
Right now, our objective is not to minutely analyze the true and false views of
но
Vedantists,
сосредоточим внимание на главной
Let us concentrate instead on the most valuable idea of Vedanta,
на
on
Адвайте.
Advaita.
Об этом, впрочем, ведь и Кришна,
By the way, Krishna also spoke
показывая
about
нам
this,
цель наших
indicating to
духовных
us
усилий.
the goal of our spiritual efforts.
Он говорил: «Я есть
He said, I am
но я
Ishvara,
также и
but
всё».
I am also everything.
То есть, говоря современным языком, абсолютно.
That is the absolute in modern language.
А все
And
это есть
everything
совокупность Ишвары,
is the sum total of Ishvara and the word of Brahman,
то есть сферы деятельности,
which is the sphere of Brahman's activity, or the creation.
включая и все материальные
That
тела
includes,
и
among other
вращаемые вниз.
things, all material bodies and evolving individual souls incarnated in these bodies.
И задача людей развивать себя до познания сначала Брахмана и слияния с
So
ним,
the task of people is to develop themselves in order to cognize Brahman and merge with it in Brahman Nirvana,
в моей
and then to
сокровенной
cognize me,
сути
as Krishna said,
и
in my
слияние
innermost
самого аспекта
essence,
и Ишвары,
and merge with me in the aspects of Ishvara and the Absolute.
иными словами, Бог в аспекте абсолюта есть
In other
именно
words, God in the aspect of the Absolute is one whole
есть именно
organism.
единый
This
организм.
is very important.
И каждый из нас должен осознать,
And every one of us has to realize,
но не только в мыслях
not only
и
in
словах,
thoughts and words, but also through the practice of development of oneself
эту
as a
осознать
consciousness,
эту его
this
тотальную
total consubstantiality of His,
сущность, а также
as
свою
well as
идеальную
one's
силу.
own consubstantiality to Him.
Причем реализация единосущности абсолюта
However, the realization of
может в реальности
consubstantiality
иметь
to
место
the
лишь после
Absolute
обретения
can really take
слияния
place only after achieving
с Творцом
mergence
Ишвары.
with the Creator Ishvara.
Ведь именно Творец бесчисленными своими
It is
руками
so because the Creator is the one who permeates and unites all His creation with His countless arms of love.
Вот в этих-то терминах и надо
It
говорить
is in
об
these
Адвайте.
terms that one has to talk about Advaita.
Причем людям, уже имеющим духовный опыт,
And it is clear for people
что
who
реализация
possess a certain
данной
level of
задачи
spiritual
возможна
experience
только через
that the realization of this task
восхождение
is possible only through gradual ascent by the following steps.
ума,
First, cleansing of the mind,
эмоциональной
body,
сферы,
emotional
основных
sphere,
энергоструктур
and the main
организма,
energy structures,
затем последующего утончения сознания
and second, further refinement of the
и
consciousness
его
and its
количественного
quantitative growth with the help of special
специальных
meditative
медитативных
methods.
приемов. Это все не похоже на то, что можно наблюдать в
All
практике
of this is
современных
nothing like what one can observe in the practice of the modern sects of Vedantists,
этих грандиозных задач
in which the solution of these grandiose tasks of the development of individual consciousnesses is seen only in reasoning and outer suggestion. This, in turn, may result in such an absurd perversion as the following outer suggestion: I am an integral part of God. I have understood this. Wherefore, all my thoughts, desires, emotions, words and acts are divine. I, as an integral part of God, have a right to do absolutely everything. I manifest the will of God here on the earth. Everyone has to obey me. Everyone has to submit to my will. If I want to, I can take away what you have. If I want to, I can kill you. I will humiliate you in order to destroy your ego, and through this will help you realize your consubstantiality with me, and so on and so far. Psychopathology that can arise against the background of such perverted sectarianism is not rare. In the past, I met such monsters several times among drug addicts who regarded their path as the spiritual path. The result of walking this path is the destruction of the intellect, which leads to the loss of ethics, coarsening of the emotional sphere, and attaining a hellish state of the soul even during life in the body. And after disembodiment, they go to hell and even attain non-duality, or Advaita, in quotation marks of course, with Prota-Purusha. After full destruction of the soul in hell, in the blazing inferno. In reality, one has to go to the true Advaita in a completely different way, in the way taught by God. What does one have to do specifically? What are the most important things on the path of Advaita Yoga? In the intellectual and ethical aspects, one has to become imbued as fully as possible with the principle of Ishvara Pranidhana, which implies to have a constant feeling that the divine consciousness permeates everything, including one's body. This helps one to constantly feel the presence of the teacher God not only nearby, but even inside oneself, which is especially important in extreme situations. And may such situations remind one about the necessity to come back to this feeling. What do you want to tell me by this? This is the question to God that has to arise in us in such situations. Another important principle is the principle of aparigraha, which means that one needs to be free from unnecessary things in order to avoid scattering one's attention and keep it focused on God.
Иисус Христос однажды сказал
Jesus
своим
Christ
ученикам:
once said to his disciples,
где сокровище ваше,
"Where your
там и
treasure
сердце ваше.
is, there your heart will be also."
Это
These are very significant words.
в итоге работы по
As a
изменению
result of
себя
the
мы
work
должны
on
будем
transforming
совместить себя
ourselves, we have to combine
как сознание,
ourselves
преображенное в
as
огромное
consciousnesses
и
which have been
утонченное духовное
transformed
сердце,
into giant spiritual heart and
утонченное
refined to
до
the
состояния
state
швары,
of Ishvara,
совместить себя
we
с
have to
сердцем
combine
Абсолюта,
ourselves with the heart of the Absolute.
то есть
That
именно
is, with
самим
Ishvara
Ишварой,
himself,
Творцом.
the Creator.
Также нам будет не обойтись без
We should also
акцента на
adhere to the principle of Hri, the lowliness of mind of a humble perception of oneself. Because if we want to achieve the mergence of two consciousnesses,
должно образоваться
two souls,
именно
we must understand that there should be formed only one consciousness.
причем если мы это
So
рассматриваем
if we want
применительно к
to
слиянию с
achieve
Богом,
a similar mergence with God,
то надо понимать, что Ишвара
we need to take into account that Ishvara is infinitely great.
в сравнении с
In
претендующим
comparison
на
with the
слияние
individual
с ним
consciousness
индивидуальным
aspiring to
сознанием,
merge with him,
сколь
no
бы
matter how highly
совершенно
developed this
оно ни было.
consciousness may be.
И это слияние представляет собой именно
And to achieve this mergence with him, we need to flow into him
в него и
and
растворение
dissolve
в нем.
in him.
Повторяю, должно
Let me
получиться
repeat
именно
that
одно
there must
сознание.
remain only one
Второму
consciousness.
здесь места не остается.
There is no place for the second one.
Вот для чего нужно
It is for this reason that one needs to try to destroy one's lower I or one's lower self.
это самое низшее я. И научиться этому надо как можно
It makes sense to start learning this
через
as
развитие
early
в
as
себе
possible,
смиренно-мудрия,
by developing lowliness of
смиренного,
mind.
скромного,
That is a humble, modest,
неамбициозного,
non-ambitious, and non-touchy
безобидчивого
feeling of
ощущения
oneself
себя
in front of the greatness of the universal
вселенского
Absolute.
абсолюта. Но овладеть этим можно лишь через освоение искусства
However, one
психической
can
саморегуляции,
achieve this only through mastering the art
основанного
of
на
psychical
очищении и
self-regulation,
своих чакр.
which is based on purification and
Об этом мы
development
подробно
of
говорили в
one's
книге
chakras.
«Экопсихология».
We spoke about this in detail in the book
Ведь,
Eco-Psychology.
например, главная чакра Аджня,
For example, the
кстати,
head
ее
chakra
название
Ajna,
переводится как
its name,
«не
by the way, is translated as non-vice.
как раз она и является носителем того
This
самого
chakra is the
низкого
carrier of the lower
человеческого «я»,
human self or I,
которое и является,
which is also the center of egocentrism.
и лишь если
So
мы
only after we
научаемся
have
выключать
learned to turn off the Ajna chakra, By moving the concentration of the consciousness into the Anahata chakra, only then and in no other way can we obtain the possibility to manifest lowliness of mind or the humble perception of oneself. Nevertheless, one also has to intellectually trace in oneself such emotions as touchiness, irritation, anger, self-defensive ambitiousness, jealousy, and other similar states of the soul. One needs to trace them in order to overcome these vices or defects in oneself. Additionally, one needs to study and implement all other ethical principles. We describe them in our book Eco Psychology in the chapters dedicated to the analysis of Patanjali's teachings called Ashtanga Yoga. Let everyone think by himself or herself about the importance of such principles as ahimsa, satya, daya, and others. Everything stated above allows one to understand that such methods of the so-called modern psychology, as insulting and humiliating of students' victims by their instructors, in order to allegedly destroy the lower cells of the students, are not only completely ineffective, but have to be considered as malicious hooliganism, which is a striking manifestation of the most disgusting qualities of these instructors. As for the psycho-energetical line of development, here one has to master all the stages of the purification of the chakras and main meridians, and then the methods of the development of oneself as a spiritual heart that becomes more subtle and bigger each time. This can be done, by the way, only against the background of hesychia, or the inner silence, which can be achieved provided that the spiritual heart has grown significantly. We discussed this subject many times in our conversation and in our books, including Eco Psychology. After this, the time comes to begin studying the entire multidimensional Absolute, first by its parts, and then by uniting all its parts during the meditation Nam. Let me explain about this meditation in more detail, because there are too many cases of its misunderstanding. The point is that from the spiritual perspective, this word has to be understood as a description of God, and not as a name of God. So then we start the meditation Nam. We, as consciousnesses, can attune or even merge, for those who are able to do this, with all divine teachers known to us. It is quite appropriate that Krishna becomes the first one of them. Then we add attunement to all the mastered layers of the multidimensional Absolute.
которые были обозначены
which
на
are
схеме
represented in the
изучения
chart for
абсолюта
studying the
в
structure
этой
of the
книге
absolute
«Психология».
published in the book Eco-Psychology.
Разумеется, не надо сливаться
Of course,
только
we
с
must not
содержимым
merge
ада,
with the content of hell,
хотя
but
именно
should know
границу с
well
этим
the
ионом
border with this eon.
хорошо бы четко запечатлеть. Надо также научиться именно
One also has
сливаться
to learn to merge with the consciousnesses
сознаниями
of the
высших
higher
энергий.
eons.
Причем механизмом такого слияния
The mechanism of such mergence
является
is the meditation called
медитация,
total
называемая
reciprocity.
тотальной рецепрокальностью. Освоение ее
Mastering
позволяет
this meditation allows one to cognize
нирваническое
the
состояние
nirvanic
звезд.
state of Nirodhi or Nirodha.
Когда мы сможем собирать в себе
When we gain the
все
ability to assemble
основные
in
ионы
ourselves all the main
одновременно,
eons simultaneously,
причем с акцентом в обители
with the
Ишвары,
emphasis on the abode of
тогда
Ishvara,
можно считать, что
this
весьма
means that we have
значительная
traversed
часть
a
пути уже
very
пройдена.
significant part of the path.
Причем осваивать все это целесообразно
Of
на
course, it is better
соответствующих
to master
каждой
the stages on the
ступени
corresponding places
местах
of power.
силы, так и для нахождения
Thus,
границы
for
с
finding
адом
the border
и для
with
освоения
hell,
каждого из
for mastering all
зазеркальных
transmirror
эонов,
eons,
а потом и для исполнения всей
and then for
медитации нам
performing the
целиком,
meditation nam,
могут быть найдены
one
соответствующие
can find corresponding places of power.
оптимальные места силы. Ищите, и
Seek them,
божественные
and
учителя
the divine
помогут.
teachers will help you.
Ну а потом
And what is next?
надо будет
Next, one has to
удвоить
double all these
все
achievements
это
with the help of
через
special
специальные
methods of Buddhi
приемы
Yoga.
йоги. Тогда способность
Thanks to
восприятию
this, one's
Ишвары
capability of
и
perceiving
Абсолюта тоже
Ishvara
увеличится.
and the Absolute will also double.
Этого уже будет
This will be
достаточно для
enough for
полноты
attaining the fullness of
слияния
mergence with
с
God
Богом
in both of His highest
в обоих
aspects.
этих высших его аспектах. Я говорю
In this case, by
сейчас о
special methods of
медитации
Buddhi
креста,
Yoga, I mean the meditation cross,
который обучал своих
which was
учеников
taught by
Иисус,
Jesus Christ to His disciples,
и на которую указывал в
and which
своем
is mentioned
Евангелии
in the Gospel of Philip.
апостол Филипп. И вот только тогда
Only
Адвайта
then does Advaita
становится
become a
полной
reality
реальностью.
and not just idle talk.
Ну и на этом работа по
After achieving all this, however, the work on the self-development does not end at all, but
и вовсе не
continues.
заканчивается. Ну, сейчас я покажу
Now
некоторые
I'm going to
приемы
show you some techniques of Advaita
Адвайта йоги.
Yoga,
Именно механизм, главный
namely the
механизм
main mechanism of the
реализации
realization of its
ее
ideas
идей
called total
– это тотальная
reciprocity.
рецепрокальность. Вот именно и только
Only
с
with the
помощью
help of this meditation
медитации тотальной
can we
рецепрокальности мы
achieve
можем
Nirodhi or Nirodha,
достичь ниродхи. Это
which
один
is
из
one of the
компонентов
components of Nirvana.
нирваны. И вот еще есть такое
There is
модное
also
сейчас
a
слово
quite popular
в английском
word,
произношении
oneness.
oneness, то есть единство,
That is, unity which
подразумевающее
implies
единство
consubstantiality.
единосущность
but consubstantiality with whom or with what?
Творцом,
With the Creator, with the Primordial Consciousness.
Этот термин сейчас стал
This
популярен
term has become especially popular among the youth of English-speaking countries.
англоязычных стран, но его упростили.
However, it was simplified and began to signify to unite with each other, to join in embraces, or to merge the anahatas. This is marvelous, but this is far away from the oneness that is written with a capital letter, and that implies the unity with the primordial consciousness.
Что такое
What is reciprocity and the reciprocal element? Reciprocity is the opposition, and the reciprocal element is the element that is opposite to the practitioner. However, in this case, you should not think about some electrical opposition, plus and minus, or about a sexual opposition, the opposition of sexes. It is all about the existence of non-I, or non-self. And the fact is that if one merges with the total non-I of higher spatial dimensions, one completely merges with the consciousness that fills those spatial dimensions. The most important dimension, as we already know, is the abode of the Creator. So the true and the highest nirvana is the mergence with Him, with the primordial consciousness. If we achieve this, we achieve the state of oneness with a capital letter. From this state we can go to the world of creation in order to help incarnate beings in their development from our new divine level. How can one start mastering total reciprocity? First, I want to emphasize that those who do not walk along the spiritual path, or have not already traversed a certain part of it, will not be able to understand at all what we are talking about. It is so because this understanding can arise only through the mergence of the developed spiritual heart with the divine non-I. Wherefore those who have not begun yet to work with their spiritual hearts will not be able to comprehend this. One can start mastering total reciprocity with a partner, but this person has to be approximately at the same level of spiritual advancement. Both practitioners can sit facing one another or stand at a distance of 2-3 meters. Both should enter their anahatas. Then each person should embrace one another with the spiritual heart. Enter his or her anahata and look from the anahata of this partner towards his or her own body. This can be a very pleasant initial exercise for mastering total reciprocity with one reciprocal element. After this, we can practice the same thing in the following way. One person should sit in the center of a circle, on a chair, for example. And others should sit around him or her at a distance of 3 meters approximately. Initially, the one who is in the center should enter the anahata of one person, then of two, of three, of four, etc. And then look from their anahatas towards his or her own body, which is in the center of the circle. The same thing can be done if there are no people of the same level of spiritual advancement around with some plants of power. Right now my body is among such friends of ours. These are pines. So I'm entering in them as consciousnesses and looking from them towards my body. This exercise can be done only by the spiritual heart. If the energy of the head chakras participate in this process even partly, nothing works. Thus the circle is formed from which I am looking at the center. The circle is non-I in this case. And if I merge with this non-I, I dissolve in it completely. Soon we will pass to another place of power and continue our conversation. Here is the place of power on which we can continue mastering the dissolution of ourselves. This place allows one to master total reciprocity without using any helping objects. Such as other people, plants, etc. On this place, all the energy of the surrounding space influences the practitioner so that he or she dissolves in this space and can look at his or her body from all sides simultaneously. The vectors of the energy of the consciousness that is here are directed to the center of the anahata of the practitioner. And these vectors are quite long. Their length is more or less 100 or 200 meters. I can completely merge with the consciousness that exists in this place, and if I do this, my former I disappears. I has entirely turned into non-I.
Что нужно для этого?
What is it necessary for this? First, as I already said, one needs to have a developed spiritual heart, because only a spiritual heart is capable of merging. Nothing else is able to merge, because mergence is the manifestation of true love. And the organ that produces this state is the Anahata chakra, from which a spiritual heart grows. If we have grown it, we obtain the ability to merge with God and with other living beings. It is possible to create the state of non-I in the eons of the Holy Spirit and in the abode of the Creator. It is important to master this method once, and then one will be able to do this without places of power. You can look for such places where you live. It is feasible to find them. I have found many of them. This is not a unique place. Now may those who can do this see what will happen to the vectors of the consciousness when I cross the border of the place of power. Here I leave it. And I, as a consciousness, assume a normal form. Namely, it turns into the spiritual heart that is expanded for hundreds of meters and that has arms. I am moving back, and the direction of the vectors changes to the opposite one spontaneously. Let's do this one more time. And on this place, the phenomenon of total reciprocity is manifested even stronger. Here it is easy to understand what Don Juan meant when he spoke about the rolling force. The point is that every one of us has an energetical cocoon that surrounds the body. And if we allow an energetical wave which rolls towards us from all sides to crush this cocoon and destroy it, the separateness created by the cocoon disappears as well. All the energy that was inside the body and inside the cocoon merges then with the surrounding consciousness. This is the basis of the phenomenon called hesychia. The totality of hesychia can be reached only by completely merging a small individuality with the ocean of the divine consciousness.
заключение
In conclusion,
показываем место, где
we
сейчас
want to
живет
show you the
Симеон,
place
новый
where
богослов.
Simon the new theologian lives now.
Один из тех, кто,
He was one of
развивая
those who have cognized the primordial consciousness or God in the aspect of the Creator by developing hesychia inside himself.
изначальное осознание, познали Бога в аспекте Творца. И вот если мы
So if we have achieved the hesychia or inner silence,
достигли внутренней тишины, внутри развитого
inside a huge and developed spiritual heart,
духовного сердца, то в этой тишине
we
мы
can
можем
hear
слышать
the voice of God
голос
in this silence, the voices of the divine teachers or Holy Spirits.
И вот Симеон, новый богослов,
And Simon, the new theologian, proved by his life that God can be cognized through the achievement of hesychia.
через обретение исихии. Ну а как достигается исихия?
Now you also know how to achieve it.